But as the past week in political news has demonstrated, the practice known to Beltway insiders as a PO has not died out under Trump. Earlier this month, a fringe right-wing website posted a picture of Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's 1984 med school yearbook page showing one figure in a Ku Klux Klan costume and another in blackface. 2 days later, the same site published an accusation of sexual assault against Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. Virginia Democrats have been stuck in crisis mode ever since. Candidates hire researchers to compile two things: self-research packets, so they're aware of their vulnerabilities and prepared for attacks, and research books on their rivals, so they know how and when to pounce. For the most part, campaigns use this material for their own purposes: debate prep, attack ads, etc., but they will also strategically steer reporters toward revelations that, once aired, can help amplify a cohesive, negative storyline about their opponents. In 2008, for instance, Barack Obama's researchers discovered, via Federal Election Commission filings, that his Democratic primary rival John Edwards had been charging $400 haircuts to his campaign, then tipped off Politico's Ben Smith, who confirmed and published the story. It's worth noting that not all, or even most, such scoops originate with opposition researchers. Reporters routinely break damaging news about politicians without any assistance from their foes. That hope stems from a common misunderstanding. The reason scandalous information is considered scandalous is not solely because it defies societal standards, it's also scandalous because it defies our expectations about the individual in question. The job of research is to look at how a candidate is known and then go directly at how he or she is known, explains Joe Pounder, a longtime Republican researcher and strategist who worked for Marco Rubio, Mitt Romney, and John McCain before co-founding America Rising, the GOP's top research firm. In Trump's case, he's always been known for exaggerated boasting, bigoted views, criminal associations, and sexual infidelity. That's why Hillary Clinton's character-based attacks didn't work in 2016, they had already been factored into his public persona. It's also why pretty much no other politicians have been or will be able to inoculate themselves from a PO the way Trump has. They simply can't afford to set expectations so low. Everyone thinks it's the end of a PO because Trump is a walking demon from hell and he doesn't pretend he isn't, Kasky explains. But I think the Trump effect is more about the large increase of white noise. When the garbage fire hose is spewing all over everyone, I see people here in Illinois start ignoring otherwise salient attacks on a candidate's record. They don't know how to distinguish one thing from the other. It's just too much to listen to. Miller agrees. You saw this in 2018, he says. C-scandals and gaffes didn't have the same salience that they had before the Trump era. It was just tougher to get them to break through in a world of constant chaos. If Northam somehow survives his yearbook scandal, he will likely have the media's ever-accelerating metabolism to thank. Some politicians, to be successful, have a unique talent to create their own reality and to live in denial. Joe Lockhart, a former White House press secretary for Bill Clinton, recently told Politico when asked about Northam's refusal to resign. My guess is that it's a big dose of that, and if I can hold on just another couple days, the way this news cycle works, everyone's attention will be turned to something else. All of which seems to suggest that research won't matter as much going forward. But quite the contrary, insists Pounder. I actually think, now more than ever, that opposition research will play a bigger role in future elections and in the political dialogue, he says. Because you're fighting for people's attention, the old adage that you had to wait until the last 30 days of an election is just not true anymore, says Pounder. It takes a lot of repetition and a lot of examples behind that repetition to form a narrative. If you're going to call someone a John Kerry-esque flip-flopper, for example, you're now going to need 2 or 3 times the amount of examples to convince people. One effect of this sort of digitization is to devalue the kind of material that any political junkie with a smartphone can now discover and disseminate, such as online C-SPAN videos. Yet there will always be work for someone who can track down obscure offline documents, such as humiliating old yearbooks. In the days after Northam's surfaced not from an Apo shop, but rather from civilian who disagreed with the governor's position on abortion, one theme on Twitter was that the campaign of his 2017 Republican opponent, Ed Gillespie, must have been asleep at the switch not to have uncovered it at the time. Likewise, digitization puts a premium on operatives who know how to weave a convincing narrative from these increasingly numerous and disparate data points. In 2020 and beyond, the result of all these converging forces will likely be a new era of information warfare. Increasing polarization and the proliferation of partisan media outlets means less emphasis on trying to persuade swing voters, and more on finding red meat to feed to the base. In that situation, almost anything goes. Our politics is just negative partisanship all the way down these days, says Miller. So now the point of Apo is about riling up your own supporters as much as anything else. You're not trying to convince anyone anymore. You're really just talking to fellow Republicans with qualms about Trump and reminding them how much they hate the other side. Meanwhile, Democrats are running the most diverse slate of presidential candidates in history. Already the list includes a black woman, California Senator Kamala Harris, a black man, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, a Latino man, former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, a gay man, South Bend, industry mayor Pete Buttigieg, and several white women, and this diversity should shield much of the field from certain kinds of Apo. But other kinds of material that may play on voters' prejudices will inevitably surface in response. Voters just care about more of these things on the Democratic side now, says Vail. They won't let their candidates get away with it, and Republicans can and will use that against us. Finally, politicians on both sides are increasingly living their lives online, which means they are constantly generating fodder for the other side's research operations, whether with their old, unguarded tweets from the early days of Twitter or their intimate Instagram stories from last week. Both American Bridge and America Rising are archiving candidates' Blink and ULL Mississippi them social media broadcasts. The latter's war room can record at least 18 live streams simultaneously. That's just a vulnerability that everyone has, says Pounder. There's more data points for us to go after than ever before. I remember working for Arnold Schwarzenegger in 06, we were dashing to the library, desperate to find audio or video of our opponent. Now, audio and video are being produced every day. The grandmother in the front row doesn't know it, but she's actually a tracker. More info, more media, more diversity, and shifting standards that make it impossible to predict which attacks will draw blood, and how much. When asked what to expect in 2020, one Republican strategist familiar with the GOP's plans called to mind the kind of battle that Russia waged on America during the 2016 election. There will be nothing standard about what we do, the strategist said. It will be coming from the left, it will be coming from the right, it will be coming from down the middle as we look to see what leverages we can play. It will be Operation Chaos.